do what your conscience dictates. I've been through this before, and I did what I thought was right when I was a freshman congressman in 1974, and I've done it this time, and I think that that's the way most Republicans feel, and we'll go to the people and point out the differences in our issues that we're going to be taking up, and let the people vote on that. Thank you very much.
Trent Lott of Mississippi, who is anxious, as he said, to go on home to his constituents. And let's take a brief word here from Kent Conrad before we have a conversation with Senator Fred Thompson of Tennessee.
Nullify the votes of the 47 million Americans who voted for President Clinton. That is an awesome power, and it has to be used with very great restraint. And I think the Senate today has acquitted itself very well in using restraint. Clearly, the president did wrong. He did things that were very wrong. But I do not believe it met the constitutional required standard for removal of a president from office. I think that's the reason you saw very strong votes against both the perjury article and the obstruction article. I'd be happy to take quick question if people have one.
What about censure now? Where does that stand?
Are you
Well,
going to come back this afternoon and do more on censure?
I think realistically censure is dead for the moment. Maybe it can be revived when we come back, but I think that's highly unlikely.
Senator Kent Conrad, who voted no on both counts. To our guests across the country and to our viewers, we have prominent members of the Senate, prominent members formerly of the White House staff, namely Leon Panetta, stacked up like, or perhaps grounded like American Airlines at this hour. So to all of them, we beg their patience. We have a number of people to get to, and we will, beginning with Republican Senator Thompson of Tennessee. Senator, thank you for coming on the air.
Thank you, Brian.
What do you think the lasting effect on the U.S. Senate will be, and is this, as has been theorized, a nation-changing experience potentially?
Well, I think that, as corny as it may sound, that probably the most profound thing that came out of this is that it shows that no matter how deeply divided we are, we can make ourselves follow the process that we ought to follow, and that the system does indeed work. And no matter how disappointed you might be as to how it turns out, we got to recognize that. And I think that will allow us to put it behind us now and go forward.
What about this president? We just heard Orrin Hatch say that this president owes the American people 3 R's. Recognize what he did, show remorse for what he did, and refrain from doing it again.
Well, I think that's all good advice, but my own feeling today is that we have spent a long time seriously considering these articles. We've done our research. I just filed a 50-page statement as to the background of my thoughts and the reason I came to my conclusions. We voted our consciences, and the results are in. I'm tired of being consumed with the personality of Bill Clinton. If he's willing to work with us and try to move this country forward in directions it ought to go, we'll put this behind us and go forward that way. But in terms of his own conscience and in terms of his own contrition and all that, I'm going to leave that between him and the good Lord from here on out, as long as he doesn't interfere with the American people and the processes of government.
You must have been angered by yesterday's New York Times showing the polar opposite of contrition, that an attack strategy was going to be underway, led by none other than the president, to go after House managers first and second any vulnerable Republicans.
Well, you know, I had mixed emotions about it because everything anybody's tried in this whole process has backfired on them on both sides. So I don't think the president will be very effective. As long as he sticks to the rules, I don't mind him coming out and campaigning against Republicans. He's expected to do that. But I think he'd be better served, if he's interested at all in trying to salvage any respect as a person out of the American people, he'll quit being trite, quit being vindictive, and get above all that, because all of us need to start getting above all of that.
Senator Thompson, a final question. I'm not trying to turn you into a social philosopher, but why didn't your own hearings, which you devoted an extraordinary chunk of your life in the Senate to, take a bigger bite out of the administration? Why does this president enjoy extra Eisenhower approval ratings to this day?
Well, it takes an awful lot to prove things to the satisfaction of people where it really gets their attention nowadays. We had some direct evidence and a whole lot of circumstantial evidence of some pretty serious things, but it never really came to the doorstep of the president. And if you don't so-called get the president, the media doesn't seem to be terribly interested in it. But I think all of this will go into to that giant time capsule that all this is presented for us. And history will judge. And as of today, it's not going to judge him very well. But if he wants to try to turn things around and do what's right from here on out, I, for one, will be standing willing to help him, although I voted to remove him from office today.
Senator Thompson of Tennessee, thank you very much. Senator, before we go, we've got a picture of them ushering people out of the Capitol. Can you shed any light on a message that's gone out to get people out of the building?
No, I don't.
Now,
I've not heard anything about that.
Well, one would assume you'd be among the first to hear. We've just lost our picture because...
Well, I'm not in the Capitol building right now.
You're over in the Senate. Okay.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Senator Thompson, the state of Tennessee. And standing by with us is Senator Patrick Leahy, Democrat of the state of Vermont, one of the stalwarts behind this president. Senator, thanks for coming on. Good to see you again.
Glad to be with you, Brian.
What can you tell us about your opinion, your thoughts? I know it's early yet. This has been called, with fairness, a potentially nation-changing experience in that it could change the axis of the American people's thinking, either clean it up or further wash it down the path of corruption.
Well, I think you're right. I think it is such a potentially nation-changing event. You know, the last 2 years have been terribly partisan around here. We've accomplished very, very little in the Congress as a result. Ended in the House partisan impeachment. I think the Senate showed that we can come back and rise above that. Senators work very closely together. I've been here 25 years. I've never seen so much effort for Republicans and Democrats to reach across the aisle to each other. But I worry very much for the country. I worry for the fact that we have turned so many people off on government or government service, that people don't want, good people, Republicans and Democrats, don't want to run for office, that the Congress, which should protect all our rights, the courts, who should protect all our rights, are held in low esteem. It should not be the way, and when you're the most powerful nation on earth, it cannot be the way.
What about this president? I'm going to ask all of our guests today the same question, because Orrin Hatch just said, by way of a recommendation to this White House, follow the 3 R's. Recognize what you've done, show remorse for it, and refrain from ever doing it again.
Well, I think that's good advice. I was concerned about making sure the Constitution was protected. History is going to judge the president's misconduct, and I'm sure history is going to judge it very, very poorly. Many of the senators have spoken with the president, told him very clearly how much we disapproved of his actions. But disapproval of his action does not mean that we throw the Constitution overboard. And today was an example of the fact that no matter the fact that every single senator, Republican and Democrat, disapproved of the president's action, that the Senate was going to protect the Constitution, and we did. Now, history, of course, will write for a long time about the president's actions. He has just under 2 years left in his term. I would hope that he would set aside the polls, set aside the trying to find a poll on this, a poll on that, a poll on something else. Just do those things that are right. Don't be afraid to make mistakes on policy and on judgment. Do things he really feels are right. He's a very, very intelligent person, very flawed individual. But do what is right, and I think you'll find the Congress will breathe a huge sigh of relief, the people will, and they'll want to get with him. If instead they just want to go and try to do war rooms and polling and who do we get now and that, the whole thing unravels.
Senator Leahy, who is going to head to his home state of Vermont along with about half of the east coast of the United States this holiday weekend. Senator, it's kind of you to come on with us live. We appreciate your time.
I can't wait to get home. Thank you very much.
I'm sure that's true. And Senator Tom Harkin is next in line to talk to us after waiting for us to come on the air. Senator, before you head home to your beloved home grounds in Iowa, same question to you that we started with Senator Leahy on, and that is this potentially a nation-changing experience?
Well, Brian, I hope that what comes out of this is a new recognition that the Constitution lives. That's what this vote, I think, showed. The Constitution lives in protecting the people of this country from those kinds of partisan actions that would create a lot of turmoil and do great damage to our country. I think the vote today was not so much a vindication of the president as it was a very severe indictment of the partisanship of the House and of the special prosecutor, Ken Starr.
We're also joined, Senator, by Senator K. Bailey Hutchison of the state of Texas. Senator Hutchison, I'm going to read for you the Associated Press Bulletin. Chief Justice William Rehnquist pronounced Clinton to be acquitted of the impeachment charges. You look at a sterile sentence like that, it's the kind of news that often hits people once they get home. How do you expect to be hit once you get home?
Well, I hope people realize that there was not a 2/3 majority, but 50 members of the United States Senate did vote guilty. And I think the bigger picture is that every senator believes that the president did not enhance the dignity of the office. And I think that is the absolute truth.
Senator, what about that document, Constitution? One of your friends across the aisle, Mr. Schumer of New York, called the framers' work elegant calculus in pushing for that 2/3 supermajority.
I think that is correct. I think removing the president should take a 2/3 vote of the Senate. It should be difficult to remove the president. I just believe that the rule of law and the standard for perjury and obstruction of justice for our country was the overriding factor here. And if we fudge on the standard for truth, I think it does hurt our justice system.
Senator Tom Harkin, you've been one of the real stalwarts in the corner of this president, regardless of what you feel about his personal behavior. But the quote from your friend Orrin Hatch on the other side of the aisle today was, he is urging, strongly telling the White House to follow the 3 R's. Recognize what you did, show remorse for it, and refrain from ever doing it again. Would you sign on to that?
That sounds like good advice to me. I might add one other thing, and that is to rededicate himself to solving the problems of this country, like Social Security and health care and education. He knows what needs to be done. In fact, I think that's why you see he has such a high approval rating. The people like his programs. I asked the president now to rededicate himself for his last 2 years to getting the job done for the American people.
What about what his biographer, Mr. Marinus, has called his near-fatal hubris in this case? Does that need to be put in a drawer in the Oval Office for a few days?
Well, maybe a few days.
But you're not ruling out weeks or months?
Well, no, I think a few days, but I think I know this president. And I can tell you, now that this is over with, he's going to start wanting to get into the policies, into the programs. He wants to leave a legacy of accomplishment on saving Social Security and building an education system for the 21st century. That's what he wants to do, and I think we can work with him to get the job done.
Senator Hutchison, if you had a direct line to the Oval Office and could offer one sentence of advice to this chief executive, what would it be today?
It would be that we want to work together, and he should reach out to Congress and admit what he has done, of course, but I think all of us want to go forward. Social Security reform, tax cuts for hardworking Americans, strengthening our education system. We cannot do this without the White House and the Congress working together, and I think we're certainly willing to step forward. He needs to meet us halfway, and let's do what's right for the American people.
Senators, both of you, thank you very much. To the
Thanks,
Republican from Texas, the Democrat from Iowa, we appreciate your time live on the air with us today.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
If they were to ever take a poll, popularity poll, among staff, members of the media perhaps, the best liked White House chief of staff, it would be a tough one, but early victory signs go to Leon Panetta, the veteran member of Congress who served this president, no longer does. He's busy on public policy issues in the state of California. He's been extraordinarily patient waiting for us to get to him. And good day to you again, Leon.
Hi, Brian. How are you?
I'm fine, sir. What about the hubris that this president's biographer has written about extensively? You've seen it up close. Many of us have. Can it be suppressed effectively enough to show contrition?
Well, I hope we'll find out in the president's statement whether he's learned from the lessons of the last year. I mean, I think to the extent that he can take some responsibility for what this country has gone through, and then try to be conciliatory and reach out to the Republicans and Democrats to try to work together on the key issues of the country. this is a moment when he can really bring closure to the impeachment process. So we'll see whether he lives up to that moment.
Congressman, the White House wants us badly to believe, and it's being reported with a straight face from the White House law and from some outlets, that this president, though in the residence, did not have the television set on. Can that be possible? His political future, and thus his future, was not a sure thing until a few minutes ago.
Brian, I have to tell you, there is no television set within the Oval Office itself, but outside in the entranceway.
Well, he was in the residence.
Well, in the residence, you have to assume that he may very well not have watched the final vote here, but you can bet he was reported to immediately upon the conclusion of each vote as to what happened. I mean, on the other hand, look, this is all anticlimactic. I think the president knew very well that he would win this vote today. The real question is whether he can now turn to the American people and get their support and get the support of the Republicans and Democrats to try to repair his legacy. That's going to be the key.
You'll forgive me if I keep pushing on this story as we go through our guests throughout the day. I want to bring another guest into this conversation. Prominent senator from the state of Connecticut, Joseph Lieberman. And Senator Lieberman, welcome to you.
Brian, thank you.
Today's Democratic spin in the minutes, the talking points seem to have Xeroxed and photocopied, I should say, and handed out that this was the proof, this vote was proof of the fact that this was a partisan effort, should never have been brought to the Senate. Do you concur with that? Do you think there's any virtue in this loss? Do you think there's any utility, a civics lesson, be it sorted in this process?
Well, I didn't get the talking point, so I'll just have to go on my own. Yeah, this is not a victory. I mean, if it's a victory for anything, it's a victory for the Constitution, which, again, when tested, worked. I mean, the president has been through an ordeal, which unfortunately his misconduct justified. But in the end, the wisdom of the framers in saying that you had to have 2/3 of the Senate vote for removal was correct. This president's behavior was bad, but it never, in my opinion, rose high enough on the sordid details of this story to justify making him the first president in our history to be removed from office. So this is not exoneration. It just says that the president was not guilty of high crimes and misdemeanors, and I think he understands that. I've got to tell you, I heard a conversation you had with Leon. Why would anybody at the White House say that he wasn't watching on TV if in fact he wasn't? And if he wasn't, I think it's because it might have just been too hard to watch, because after all, on successive votes, 45 and 50, members of the Senate stood up and asked that he be removed from office.
Well, those of us who respectfully spent some time there can tell you that it's been tried before. Proof to the contrary that the president was indeed parked in front of a television set. Senator Lieberman, one of your Democratic colleagues, two quotes I want to run by you.
Sure.
Charles Schumer called the framers elegant calculus responsible for today's outcome, the supermajority that was needed and failed. And Senator, help me out, Steve. They're all no, I know it's Senator.
We all look alike.
Senator Hatch. Senator Hatch came up with the. We've got a lot of people on the air with us today.
Sure.
Came up with the president should recognize what he's done wrong, show remorse for it, and refrain from future behavior. To which Harkin added, also rededicate himself to moving laws along.
Yeah, well, they're both right. I mean, Chuck Schumer is right. There is an elegant calculus. It's simplistic, but the framers first gave this job of considering the misconduct of a president not to a court, but to a political body, the Senate, and second, in a masterstroke, said you have to have 2/3 of the senators voting to remove to take a president out of office. Now, that means that in almost every Congress that's existed since then, the behavior of the president has to be so extremely bad that members of both parties conclude that he should be removed from office. And once again here it worked, because to have removed the president for this course of behavior would have lowered the bar and undercut the fundamental principle of our democracy, that it's the people who elect the president, and for us to take him out really requires awful behavior. But I think Tom Harkin and Orrin Hatch are right. And I'm very confident that what you're going to see from the White House now is reconciliation, is rebuilding. This president has always been a doer. He wants to build a record. He wants to say, I helped the country. And now, With 2 years left, he knows that the only way to do that is to reach across the aisles and work with Republicans. So I don't think you're going to find a lot of vendetta or revenge. I think you're going to find an effort to find common ground, and that's good for the country.
Leon Panetta, the only problem with that is yesterday's New York Times story, and it seemed to have a true ring about it and seemed to come from inside the West Wing. This plan, allegedly the president at the top of it, going after, with due vindictiveness, the Republican managers at minimum and all vulnerable GOP candidates at most.
Brian, that's the kind of disastrous story that used to drive any chief of staff nuts.
But never you.
To have Listen, you know, sometimes there are advisors who will say anything to the press, and unfortunately this was the wrong time to say something like that. I think the president is above that. I think he knows that he can't be vengeful, that he's got to rise above it. If he wants to get anything done, very frankly, in the Congress, he can't afford to be vengeful. He's got some repair work to do on his legacy. The Republicans have an awful lot of work to do on their reputation, and Democrats, to their credit, want to get something done on the issues. So it really is the chemistry to try to get something positive done. I think anything that looks like it's vengeful at this point is going to hurt the president badly.
Senator Lieberman, we have historian Doris Goodwin standing by to talk to, and if she were given an essay assignment this afternoon to write about this president's legacy, paragraph 1, as you know, would be occupied, totally taken up by this one subject, the first elected president tried in the U.S. Senate, impeached in the House. Who does Bill Clinton see about that?
Well, I think he works real hard over the next couple of years to make sure that that story of the impeachment is in the second paragraph and not in the first. I mean, the truth is that he's presided over and has reason to take credit for the most extraordinary times in my lifetime, in this my adult lifetime in this country, the economy and the general sense of optimism and well-being, and hopefully we'll get back to that. I mean, that's what made this last year such a tragedy. It was an unnecessary tragedy that he brought on himself by his own failures, because he's had a remarkable record of accomplishment and the country's in great shape, and by his own behavior he dragged us down for a year. I think now for the next 2 years he's going to try to bring us up again.
Leon Panetta, absent the modern-day equivalent of a Marshall Plan, absent the wise counsel and advice of a Harry Hopkins, how does this president do that?
He does it by recommitting himself to the business of the country. He has got to reach out. It's going to challenge him probably more than ever, because I do think there are probably some deep wounds that have been left by this whole impeachment process that he's going to have to overcome. So he's going to be tested. He's going to be tested in terms of his word. He's going to be tested in terms of his own credibility to try to really move the country in the right direction. These next 2 years will really tell us whether or not he can restore his legacy, or whether or not impeachment will be the lead on the story in history.
I want to thank both of you gentlemen very, very much for your patience and for your views. Joseph Lieberman, Democratic Senator from the state of Connecticut, where he'll be headed in moments from now, one can guess, to spend this weekend. And Leon Panetta, who's already in a beautiful place in the state of California. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Before we go to Senator John Kerry of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, let's pause and show you what Henry Hyde had to say on the following topic. It's been widely surmised this president is still facing indictment during or after his term in office. Henry Hyde spoke to that issue, criminal charges, just a short time ago.
I think the president, well, I don't want to venture too far down this road, but I don't think indicting and criminally trying him after what we have all been through is going to be helpful to the country. I think we should try to find areas we can agree on and get some legislation passed.
That was notable. It will be viewed as notable throughout this day and throughout the Capitol, where we are joined, as we are each day at this time, we like to joke, by the Democratic senators from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. John Kerry. Senator, good day to you.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm all right. What of those words just spoken by Henry Hyde?
Well, I think they're very important, and I agree with them. I think that we need to move on. The United States Senate voted today an obviously historic vote, and a significant vote because of the bipartisanship. It's time to move on.
Non sequitur, but then again related. You going to run for president, and how do you run against this president, this administration, and his living legacy of Al Gore?
I haven't made up my mind, but I'm not running against the president if I run. I'm running for the future and my vision of what the future is. It's a very different thing. I mean, we have much to do in education. We have a huge amount to do for children who are poorer than they've been in this country for a long time. There's an enormous agenda. I agree with much of what the president has done, but that doesn't mean that I might not do more or choose to put priorities in other places, even as I support him very much.
Could you make a case, Senator, that this changes the nation for the better somehow down the road?
We're going to have to make certain that some of those who have pushed this with really such zealotry for so long understand the significance of what happened today and don't try to keep coming back and coming back. If we can now turn our energies to the best of what we saw in the United States Senate, and I will tell you, Brian, we saw some great moments. There was a wonderful cross-aisle effort to reach out. People spoke their hearts in those closed sessions, and I think it built a bond in this Senate that has the ability, if people take advantage of it, to benefit the nation. But the test will be in the next weeks and months, and none of us can say with certainty what will happen.
This president's going to speak in some form, in some venue this afternoon about what has happened to him or what has not happened to him. What would your advice be for that statement?
Well, my advice to the president would be to be very direct and very honest and very personal about the way in which he knows this has affected the nation, the way in which he feels that he has been responsible for it, what he has learned and what we as a nation can learn from it. And I think it's got to be just, you know, no rhetoric at all, just an honest bearing of his feelings about where we find ourselves. And there has to be a reiteration, in my judgment, of his sense of responsibility for what has brought us here.
When you go home to the Commonwealth this weekend, as I assume you'll do,
in about half an hour, I'm on my way.
Okay. Well, when you go home, and thank God for the shuttles, what do you tell the folks there? And do you think you'll be greeted with widespread admiration or some scorn by the small but vocal conservative wing in the Commonwealth?
I have to tell you, truthfully, I have no idea, no expectation. I haven't thought about it. I know one person is going to hug me, and that's my daughter, because I'm taking her to a hockey game tonight. Other than that, I'm going to try and spend some time over the weekend with my wife and quietly decompress, and that's what we're doing.
We got the message. I can hear the car idling. Go on ahead. Enjoy your weekend. Senator
Thank you,
John
sir.
Kerry, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And from the state of Maine, we are joined by the other senator in a delegation, by the way, that is non-male. They are happy to point out, down east, Senator Susan Collins. Senator, your peer, Olympia Snowe, went the other way. You are both Republicans. Do you think she's in for any scorn in the conference?
Actually, I too voted not guilty on both articles. It was a very difficult decision for me on Article 2 because I thought the evidence of obstruction of justice was very strong. But in the end, I didn't think either the conduct nor the method of concealing it rose to the level where we should oust this duly elected president.
A lot of us thought you had telegraphed your coming votes more than Senator Snowe. Some observers are more surprised at the way she went. I don't know if that's fair or not. How do you think you'll be received in the state of Maine?
Throughout this process, my constituents have expressed their views to me, but they have also told me to do what I think is right. And my hope is that once I get back home, which I'm very eager to do, and explain my votes, that they'll understand that I didn't reach my decisions lightly, and that regardless of whether they agree with me, they will respect how I came out on these very important issues.
Can I give you a quote from Orrin Hatch, who wants this White House to do the 3 R's: recognize what the president's done, show remorse for it, refrain from ever doing it again. Do you think that's good advice?
I think it's very good advice. I would like to hear the president finally accept responsibility for putting this country and the United States Senate, indeed all of us, through this ordeal during the past year. He alone has been responsible for this, and I say that as one who, albeit with a lot of misgivings, ultimately voted to acquit him.
Senator, finally, do you think there is a good side of this that'll come out for the American people who've been forced by dint of nonstop exposure to watch this unfold.
Ironically, there is an outcome that I think is very positive for the country, and that is that there is no bitterness or recriminations or rancor among senators, unlike what we saw after the House vote. Ironically, I think this experience has brought the members of the Senate closer together, and I think we're going to be able to work better than ever before as a Senate to accomplish the business of the American people.
Senator Susan Collins, thank you very much. It would have been Mohawk Air and New England Air a few years ago. I guess it's Delta today, huh?
Delta and U.S.
There you go. Okay, Senator Susan Collins of Maine going home shortly. As we mentioned to you, there are a number of cameras still up and running, and a number of either House managers coming forward or U.S. senators. We've been sampling a lot of the reaction from both. Interesting to read once again the bulletin. Associated Press, Chief Justice William Rehnquist pronounced Clinton to be acquitted of the impeachment charges. We are happy to be joined by a longtime contributor here and someone whose wisdom we turn to all the time, presidential historian and prolific author Doris Goodwin. Doris, this is a big day in American history, and the kind of thing that almost, when you read that sterile bulletin, almost needs time and will hit everyone as they get home this evening.
Yeah, there's no question. It was more emotional watching it than I thought because we knew the ending. I thought it wouldn't be dramatic, but when I first heard those people say guilty or not guilty and realized that had this gone a different way, this president might have been removed, I mean, it was just an extraordinary, I could feel my heart beating.
Well, that's because you venerate the system and venerate the democracy and the work of the framers like so many other Americans, and it was chilling, unexpectedly chilling, to hear the words enunciated. If you were the Harry Hopkins to this Bill Clinton, and there doesn't seem to be one in his magic bag, what would your advice be for the remarks coming up this afternoon?
Well, I think it's so important that he says that he wrote the first chapter of this long play that we've been indulged in this last year and a couple months, and that he says that irretrievable time has been lost and he takes responsibility for that. I mean, even though the acquittal and the partisanship nature of the impeachment proceeding, I think, will lighten the stain on his future legacy, his conduct is not going to go without historical censure, partly because historians are going to look at newspapers. That's the first draft of history, and they're going to see how tough the New York Times was in its editorial, how many papers called for resignation. So he's got to accept that an enormous amount has been lost, and then he's got to say to the country and to himself, I will do everything I can in these next couple of years to make up for that. And that means he has to prioritize in a way he hasn't before. He's got to discipline himself. He's got to forget the anger, however it's there, however he might feel it justified. It will do him no good. So he's got to reach deep within himself and say, I've got 2 years to bring this back. And maybe he can. Let us hope he can.
I've been, by omission, misquoting. Just been reminded by good friends and co-workers here. Senator Orrin Hatch, who went beyond 3 R's and offered 4 by way of advice for this president. Recognize what you've done wrong, show remorse for it, refrain from ever doing this kind of thing again, and restitution. Make up for it. Doris, in a previous conversation, Mr. Marinus, his biographer, mentioned the fatal and near fatal at times hubris this president has displayed, unable to suppress. What would your counsel be on that really unavoidable portion of his personality?
Well, I think this is the moment when he's got his whole life ahead of him after these 2 years, and he's got to say himself, this is his last campaign, the most important campaign he will ever have. You know, I was thinking if he had been watching it, what must it feel instead of watching your poll numbers go up on a screen that shows you've won the presidency or you've won the governorship? Guilty, not guilty, guilty, not guilty. It has to put a hole in your heart. And the only way to repair that is for him to figure out what parts of his personality and his temperament have hurt him. You know, they used to say that FDR had a first-class temperament and a second-class intellect. Well, this guy clearly has a first-class intellect. Now the question is his temperament up to his intellect? And he's got to prove it in these next couple of years.
The fabulous quote of Oliver Wendell Holmes after his first meeting with the young Eisenhower in his townhouse darn near on his deathbed in Washington. Doris, it's always a pleasure. You know that. And
thanks,
thank you for adding your thoughts to today. Doris, by the way, joining us for reasons undisclosed thus far from Greencastle, Indiana. I suspect offering her wisdom to the heartland in America. Much has been said about about this president's upcoming remarks this afternoon. Who better to shed some light on the inside line, the early line from the White House than their former special counsel and man appropriately and affectionately referred to around here as the last dog, Lanny Davis. Lanny,
I knew you'd get that in, Brian.
Of course, this may be our last shot at this. Lanny, I know you've been in touch with folks over there.
Yes.
If not the boss, A, are we really to believe he didn't watch this in the residence? And B, what's the early line on what he says?
I believe that he's capable of not watching something that would be painful, and yes, I believe it, if that's what they've said. I think what Senator Hatch has recommended, what Doris Goodwin has suggested is what we will hear. I think you will see a president who wants to move on and wants to take responsibility and wants to bring closure. I don't believe the New York Times story yesterday reflects both President Clinton's desire and the judgment of the top staff at the White House. I think everybody sees a confluence of what Republicans need and what the president needs coming together, which is to govern the country, get back to business, take care of people's lives on issues they care about. That's what you'll hear today.
This is his only chance, though, Lanny, to be non-political about something, anything. If he starts talking more agenda than almost personal agenda, that is bound to offend those who want him just once to fall on that imaginary sword.
No, I don't agree that we want him to fall on imaginary swords or real swords. I think the American people want him to get back to business and acknowledge that he helped bring some of this on himself. But I don't think that he should go excessively in the direction either way. Certainly, I and people on the outside have a right to say that the House Republicans have a responsibility here. Their own Republican Senate couldn't muster a majority to support the House case. So there's a lot of culpability to spread around, not just President Clinton's. The House Republicans, even people like myself, have all contributed to this process. Now it's time not to fall on swords, but to get back to business.
How about fall on one's knees, as was recommended by Orrin Hatch? Lanny, a few more votes. And realize this, we'd be talking about takeoff times for Air Force One tomorrow morning.
Well, I think a few is not really inaccurate expression. A lot more votes. There is never going to be a bipartisan two-thirds to oust a president of the United States on a case so weak that the perjury count had no trouble in mustering more than a majority to repudiate the House case, and they couldn't get a majority on an obstruction case where all the direct evidence contradicted the House manager's case. I think where we are today is a process that got excessive because of the scandal culture, the scandal machine on both sides of the fence, Brian. Democrats did it to the Republicans in the 80s. Then the Republicans did it to the Democrats in the 90s. I think now is a magic moment of bipartisanship to get rid of this scandal machine and get back to business.
I know, Lanny, you're going to say that this will come from the heart, thus will be written by the boss, but which speechwriter has been assigned to the project?
Oh, that's confidential information, but I do believe that Paul Begala will have his input, and I think there will be a team effort. Ultimately, the one speechwriter is Bill Clinton, probably the best speechwriter in the White House, and he'll write that speech at the end of the day.
You ended as predicted, but you also shed some light on the speechwriter issue, which is why I asked. Lanny Davis, thank you very much. We'll come back to you. Jonathan Alter of Newsweek is also with us, and Jonathan, we're seeing so many different dynamics, and that is the Democrats. Hi, Jonathan Turley. Let's talk to you. There's Jonathan Alter. Well, we know we have both Jonathans on the skids and ready to go.
A lot of Jonathan.
Jonathan Alter, we'll begin with you. We've seen so many different dynamics. Clearly a photocopy-like set of talking points for the Democrats, talking one by one, almost unabashedly, in order about the fact that it couldn't get higher than 50-50 on the second count shows that this never should have been before the United States Senate, shows the second talking point, this was a partisan effort. What say you to that?
Well, Brian, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, what's interesting is what happened with Republican moderates on the House side, where the issues were not really very fully aired. The House moderates went for impeachment. On the Senate side, quite a number of Senate moderate Republicans decided that the evidence simply wasn't there, and they didn't go for it. It's not to say that they didn't infer or even assume that the president was lying, but on the strict matter of the evidence, they didn't see it, especially on perjury. Brian, if I could, I'd like to sort of offer a little bit of a prediction about what we might hear from the president.
Go ahead.
I'm loath to do that normally because so much egg is on our faces over our predictions over the course of the last year. But today is Abraham Lincoln's 190th birthday. And if you listen to Bill Clinton's speeches over the years, he many times quotes Lincoln, especially when Lincoln talks about the better angels of our nature, with malice toward none and charity toward all. I think it's a fairly safe prediction that you will hear the president quoting the great emancipator later on today.
Because we're not joined immediately by those on the far Republican right, I have to ask this question. Would it not serve him better to quote Lincoln's vice president?
Well, he could work in a reference to that as well. I don't think he's going to try to wrap himself in Lincoln's mantle as if he is Abraham Lincoln, but just try to talk about Lincoln trying to move past divisions, which he did so eloquently in that famous second inaugural.
Jonathan Turley is with us, rounding out our onboard staff supply of Jonathans. And Jonathan Turley, much was, well, they attempted to make a lot of this simple majority idea. A lot of Republicans in the Senate plainly felt badly for the House managers, as they've come to be known as a group. And so it was said, you know, if we get 51 in any of these categories, why, that's a victory. It's not by any reading of the Constitution, and that's the problem.
Well, I think that's right. I think that it's silly to count the votes. I always did. To me, the merits of the case will rise and fall on the evidence. I've talked with many of the senators, including some that voted to acquit, who believed that the conduct was proven. You heard one from Maine who said that she believed that he did commit obstruction of justice, or the evidence was strong, but she didn't want to remove him from office. But what we're left, really, is a 21st century trial. You know, what may have been the mistake is that we tried a 21st century president, maybe the first one, according to an 18th century document. And some of us, frankly, want to go back to the 18th century. I don't think I'm ready to cross that bridge with the president. Maybe I'm roadkill on the bridge to the 21st century, but I don't understand it. And many Americans will have a hard time understanding it. It's not that some of us who wanted conviction wanted the morality of the 18th century, we just wanted the clarity of it. And what we have with this trial and this verdict is sort of a verdict for our time. It has all the ambiguities and uncertainties. And I don't think anyone's going to feel any sense of satisfaction. Certainly, there shouldn't be any feeling of vindication on either side.
Jonathan Alder, one more for you. If you were, forget Lincoln for a moment. If you were writing this, if you had his ear, how much contrition and how much would you counsel him to stay away, flatly stay away from politics?
Well, wow, I'm really loath to get into to that idea of trying to offer him any counsel on this. I don't really go for journalists who do that. But just in terms of what will go over better, some mixture of contrition, genuine, heartfelt remorse over having started all of this, essentially, with an appeal to healing, an appeal to moving on. And I don't think it's that hard to predict that that is the direction that it'll go in. The question is just how long it'll take him to say it.
Both points taken. Thank you, Jonathan Alter. Thank you, Jonathan Turley. We have been reading one sentence because it chillingly and so plainly spells out what we've all witnessed watching this extraordinary turn of events this morning and this afternoon. It is the Associated Press bulletin that reads, Chief Justice William Rehnquist pronounced President Clinton to be acquitted of the impeachment charges. This is where we've come to today, and the Clinton presidency came that close to ending. It would have been the first forced removal of a president from office. It was not hard to contemplate at one point. This is NBC News special coverage. At this point, we want to welcome additional NBC television stations across the country, and welcome once again the viewers joining our NBC News special coverage on MSNBC Live all this afternoon. Brian Williams with you, and we want to go quickly to two members of the U.S. Senate standing by patiently to talk to us. Senator Max Baucus, Democrat of the state of Montana, and Larry Craig, Republican of the state of Idaho. And gentlemen, thank you very much. Senator Craig, we'll begin with you. Yours has been one of the most forceful voices against this president from a moral basis, behavioral basis, and what's good for the nation. What are Americans who agree with you to think about what happened there in the Senate today?
Well, Brian, while they may not like the outcome, I hope they recognize that we played by the rules. We followed our Constitution, we sought the truth, we kept the process clean, and we worked very hard with our colleagues on the other side of the aisle to keep it bipartisan. So this president is now free to go on about the business of governing the nation, but the Constitution is intact. We didn't establish any dangerous precedent, and most importantly, we did it right. Now, in the end, nearly 80 senators spoke out about their concern about this president, that he probably lied and that he obstructed justice. I felt he did, and I felt that that rose to the level of removing him from office. But a majority, 2/3 or 67, didn't agree with that. But this president is wounded. There's no question about that. But I want to work with him. We've got a very important agenda out there, from Social Security reform to tax relief to taking care of our teenage crime situation and drugs. So I hope now in the next 18 months we can work with this president to deal with the people's business.
Senator Baucus, one of Senator Craig's neighbors, both geographically and on the GOP side of the Senate aisle, Senator Hatch, used the 4 R's today as advice to the White House. Recognize what you've done wrong, show remorse for it, refrain from doing it again, and show restitution to the American people. Would you sign on to any or all of those 4 as advice?
I think that those are good, wise words of advice, but I think there's a deeper message in all this, and that's that the American people can be confident and rest assured and be very proud of a Constitution that's sound, a process that does work. I mean, here we consider it a very, very grave issue, whether to remove the president, never before accomplished in American history, and we faced it very seriously. I must say also that during the deliberations, and particularly during the closed deliberations, senators reached very deep down to try to determine what they thought was right, and to tell us, to tell their colleagues why they've reached the conclusions that they've reached. And so not only should the president be remorseful, but more than that, get on with it, to show proper contrition and a sense of chastisement that is wiser because of all this. But you know, this chapter is over. The Senate has spoken very decisively, and I think for the right reason. And let's get on with it. Let's get on with health care, education, and foreign policy, and national security, and all the things that the American people really want us to be doing back here in Washington.
Late news just into us that allegedly in 27 minutes, the president will walk into the Rose Garden, scheduled for 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Obviously, we'll go to the Rose Garden as soon as we can, and this punctuality-challenged president leads us to warn that time is subject to change, but we urge viewers to stay with us. We are finally going to hear what the president has to say. I'm going to interrupt both of our senators who have been so patient with us to go quickly to the White House, and veteran NBC News White House correspondent John Palmer with a readout on what we can expect. John?
Yes, Brian, we're expecting the president to make a statement here at the White House at 2:30. The president is expected to talk about, with some feeling of remorse, about what has happened and his role and what the country has gone through for the past year. He's expected to make this a kind of a pivot point to talk about the future, an invitation going out to the Speaker of the House of Representatives and the leader, the Republican leader in the Senate, to meet here at the White House with the president to talk about the nation's agenda, talk about Social Security, education initiatives, and things of that nature. The president is expected again to express some contrition and talk mostly about what he expects to accomplish in the next year or so with the help and cooperation of Republicans. Just a short time ago, we saw the president's complete entire legal team come down the driveway here, going right through the gate on this beautiful day in Washington with the temperature in the 70s. They came through on their way over across the park to have lunch together. No doubt, as you can see there were a lot of smiles there on various people's faces. There's David Kendall, the president's private attorney from the Williams & Connolly law firm, as well as Charles Ruff, the president's lead counsel, and all of those that argued the president's case. There's no real gloating that one sees here today, certainly a feeling of relief. And Joe Lockhart said a short time ago he hoped very much that there would be a feeling in the city of Washington, a better feeling about politics and politicians, that there would be some of the bitterness would disappear that we have seen so much of in these recent months, and especially recent weeks as this trial has gone on, the division between Republicans and Democrats. So again, in about 25 minutes from now, we expect to have the president and his reaction to these the vote on the 2 articles of impeachment. Certainly there is pleasure here at the White House that those forces that were trying to impeach him and remove him and convict him and remove him from office were not able to muster a majority on either of those 2 articles of impeachment. And we're told, somewhat surprisingly, that the president was over in the family quarters during the vote on both these articles of impeachment, and they said he did not watch any of it on television. But John Podesta, his chief of staff, left the West Wing here, then went over to the president and talked to him, and they talked about the wording that the president would use in his remarks coming up very shortly.
John Palmer from the North Lawn, thanks as always. Now we know what's going on at the White House, let's go back to our senators. Max Baucus, beginning with you before we go to Senator Craig. Is it conceivable, you know this president fairly well, is it conceivable he didn't watch his political fate being decided on live television?
It's conceivable. I know that I'd be watching if I were in his shoes. But, you know, it's still the basic charge for all of us is to go ahead, let's come together. The public is sick and tired of politics, partisanship in Washington, D.C. We know that. And I just very much hope that senators, both sides, House members, both sides, the president recognize that and get on. Because basically, the best politics is no politics. The people won here. The president didn't win. The House managers didn't win. The people won. They basically know deep down that the president should not be removed. They want to get on with the nation's business. I very much hope that's what we in Washington do.
Senator Craig, what of what your friend from the great state, Big Sky State of Montana just said, coupled with what Henry Hyde said a few minutes ago, the president should not be indicted in a criminal case?
Well, that's going to play out long after the president leaves office. Max is right. We have an agenda here to work on, but I think Max is wrong when he says there ought to be no politics. This is a political city, and there are very real differences in policy between what the president wants for Social Security and what we want. We're going to save Social Security and strengthen it for the old and for the young people of our nation. But the president wants 70 new big spending programs, and we want to give that money back to the hard-earned taxpayers. Now, I'm afraid Max and I are probably going to differ on some of that. That's politics. The key here is the rancor, the style of the politics, the spin machine of the White House that goes out and attacks individuals and goes after their character. We've never had that with any other White House, to my knowledge. I hope they turn their spin machine off. We're not going to have one. We never have had one. Ours has always dealt with policy and not personality. We were forced to deal with a very tough issue because that's what the House sent us. I'm proud of the way we dealt with it. Now, Mr. President, I hope your message this afternoon is that you'll come sit down with us and work out some of these real policy differences. Because if you don't, there's going to be some more politics in this town before the end of this session.
Senator Craig, I am duty-bound to mention entire departments set up for that kind of thing in the Nixon White House. Senator Baucus, it must have enraged you, however, picking up the New York Times yesterday morning and reading this leak that has not been denied entirely on the facts that certain people will be targeted by this White House.
Well, I was disappointed, disturbed when I saw that. Surely, when time passes in the next couple of days, cooler heads are going to prevail, and the White House is not going to indulge in retribution or vindication. But the main point here is, sure, there are differences of opinion over policy. My gosh, that's why we all seek office, and we're trying to find solutions. What to do with this surplus, how much Social Security, etc. I'm just
usually thick glass on the French door leading to the Oval Office. We'll keep an eye on that. And there's another shot available too, a unique one. That is noted Time magazine photographer Dirk Halstead, now joined by another photographer, taking the view of the assemblage in the Rose Garden. There is a huge press contingent, as John Palmer rightly points out. They're getting, before the president comes out there, they're getting the president's eye view of what it will be like to stand at that podium. Behind the podium, nothing has happened there. We want to point out those are members of the White House Communications Agency, getting the audio feed line set up, getting the flags weighted down as the wind has picked up on an incredibly balmy day. That is the president's official photographer walking toward us now. On this incredibly balmy day in Washington, where a bit of a breeze has kicked up. The president will be flanked traditionally by the American flag, by the seal of the president, the purple and gold fringed flag, and again, he'll be coming out from left to right, a walk now very familiar to Americans. The Clinton Oval Office, subject of so much disappointment to Americans who venerate the office, if not just the structure. The Oval Office, the very desk right inside there behind that Secret Service agent, where the plastic encased coconut once sat on John Kennedy's desk, the desk that Mr. Clinton uses now. The coconut that led to John Kennedy's rescue after PT-109 was sliced in half by a Japanese patrol boat. The coconut John Kennedy floated out into the water before rescuing one of his own teammates by putting his safety harness in his teeth and swimming for 3 hours through very cold water in the Solomon Islands. It's that kind of history that makes the Oval Office what it is, say nothing of all those summer non-air-conditioned days FDR spent planning a war with Winston Churchill. Lanny Davis, sorry about the history lesson, but it's the background from which we're showing this today.
I'm looking at that scene and in a way wish I could be there, because this is closure. You remember, Brian, I received the first phone call from the Washington Post on Tuesday night, January 20th, 1998, and that was the first anyone in the White House learned about the story that was about to be published the next day. And now, about a year or more later, I hope that this story is over.
What did you say to the Washington Post when they called?
I don't know if I can say this on the air, but after a certain expletive, when Peter Baker told me the 3 points that he wanted me to react to, that there had been an independent counsel appointed to investigate the president on a sexual relationship and that there were audio tapes, I then hung the phone up, called the White House, was told you better get down here right away, and that was the beginning.
Let's go on this. Did you meet with the president upon arrival?
No, the president was meeting with the Prime Minister of Israel that night.
Right.
And I went directly to John Podesta's office, the then Deputy Chief of Staff. We went upstairs to Chuck Ruff's office still, and then the White House counsel, and we began to try to decide what to do.
For our viewers just joining us, 2:35 and a half here in the East Coast for a scheduled 2:30. Nothing new there. We've been given the 5-minute warning. White House media veterans know that is usually closer to 10 than 5. The so-called drop-dead warning is a 2-minute warning. That they usually hold firm to, even in this White House with this president. 2 things will happen. There's a close-up shot of the French door we've been looking at. You will see young presidential aide Chris Enskov, the absolute pride of Berryville, Arkansas, come out. There he is. He's right behind Joe Lockhart. Chris is the carrier of the remarks that will be in a manila folder placed on the podium, known affectionately as the Blue Goose for its size, color, and bulletproofedness. Enskov is walking back into the Oval Office. The signal will be given, alerting the press corps, and the president will come on out. Let's go to John Palmer, who can fill in some of the blanks while we watch that French door.
It looks like we have gotten the 2-minute warning there. All is in readiness, and again, there are several hundred members of the press gathered in the Rose Garden for the president's remarks. There are going to be a lot of questions for the president. He's going to make a brief statement, we are told. He's not expected to take any questions, but a lot of questions certainly are going to be offered by the press. There are a lot of questions that they want to ask about not only his future plans, but perhaps some more personal things about how things are now in the White House with him and his family and what have you. Whether the president chooses to elaborate on his remarks remains to be seen. But this has been a long-anticipated time. As Lanny Davis said, to look for closure. Everybody seems to be looking for closure. Today, Joe Lockhart, in a meeting with reporters this morning, was saying everybody really is feeling a sense of relief here, and they hope they will find closure. A number of aides are expected to be departing the White House in the coming weeks now. A lot of aides had put their plans to leave, to go into the private sector. They had put those plans on hold so as not to desert the president in his hour of need of support as he battled these impeachment charges. And now that that has been put to rest with his acquittal on both accounts, we would expect people like Paul Begala, who's a very close aide to the president, to go back to Texas in a few weeks and resume his teaching career there. There will be some other aides in the White House that have plans to move on, to go to other things. The president himself is expected to talk today, not at great length, but talk about the things that he wants to accomplish a lot in the next 2 years.
Here comes the president wearing a conservative white shirt, blue tie, coming out of the Oval Office to the podium.
Now that the Senate has fulfilled its constitutional responsibility, bringing this process to a conclusion, I want to say again to the American people how profoundly sorry I am for what I said and did to trigger these events and the great burden they have imposed on the Congress and on the American people. I also am humbled and very grateful for the support and the prayers I have received from millions of Americans over this past year. Now I ask all Americans, and I hope all Americans, here in Washington and throughout our land, will rededicate ourselves to the work of serving our nation and building our future together. This can be, and this must be, a time of reconciliation and renewal for America. Thank you very much.
In your heart, sir, can you forgive and forget?
I believe any person who asks for forgiveness has to be prepared to give it.
Do you feel vindicated, sir?
Surprising, the president took a shouted question, and that was Bill Clinton, the Southern Baptist, talking about forgiveness. Duty-bound to point out that is 180 degrees at odds with yesterday's New York Times front page story, that this White House, led by this president, is targeting and soon to be going on the attack against their targeters, the GOP House managers and other Republicans in the House. A view of the assembled press corps now available. It is a crowded Rose Garden today. These are the photos that will make the covers of Time, Newsweek, U.S. News, Washington Post.
I talked to him. Do we have some sound? Let's wait till we get this fixed. Can you hear me now? Good. I talked to him just before he went out about this morning. Let me talk a little bit about, obviously what he said was something that, that he wrote for himself. He spent some time thinking about it last night, got up this morning, spent some time, his mother-in-law is in is here and staying over in the residence. So they spent some time this morning. I think late in the morning he went and had his daily exercise and was working out. Pardon?
What are we doing?
I didn't ask.
What is his daily exercise?
I didn't ask. So I guess I can't be specific. Let's see. After that, he spent some time with the First Lady, who had some friends. They chatted for a while, and then he talked to his staff a little bit on the phone about what the plans for the afternoon was, went away to think about it some more, draft, work some more on what he wanted to say. John Podesta, the Chief of Staff, called him after each vote and informed him of how the vote had been going, how the votes went. He did not watch, no.
Why not?
He chose not to.
Was Mrs. Clinton with him, or did he have a priest with him or a minister?
No, I think for part of the votes he was finishing his exercise, and for part of that time he was probably beginning to work on the statement, but he did not watch. Was informed by his Chief of Staff. Anyway, he finished, figured out what he wanted to say, how he wanted to do it, and came over here and you just watched.
Fair to say he was working on the statement at the moment the vote was being taken?
I can't be that exact.
Did he make any phone calls thanking anyone?
I don't believe he did this morning. I expect this afternoon he'll make some calls. I'll try to let you know.
Clinton with him this morning at all?
For part of the time.
You met with him. Would you describe his mood? Was he relieved? Was he...
Oh, I think naturally this coming to an end brings relief both to the President and to people here at the White House. But I think you can judge for yourself based on what he had to say to you.
What did he say when Podesta told him about the votes?
I'm not sure. They were very short. I was on John's end, but they were very short conversations. John let him know what the votes were. Obviously, all the Democrats had gone one way. John let him know who had gone the other way, and I didn't get much from the other end.
Did you say that he spent time with the First Lady and a group of her friends?
So I know that she was there with some people, and he wandered by, spent some time with them, and then went to work.
What group was that?
Joe, is this still a vote-free zone now?
Absolutely.
Joe, can you be specific about Podesta's end of the conversation? I mean, did he say Chafee voted, so-and-so voted, so-and-so voted?
No, he said that on the first vote, I think there were 9 or 10, and then 5, and he listed, who had voted which way, and that was it.
So he listed the Republicans.
I think so. I can't completely recall.
I want to know that.
I don't know that he asked to know that. I know that it seemed to be a relevant piece of information at the time, and John chose to pass it on.
He did ask for the overall vote, too, didn't he?
No, John called him to tell him. So, I mean, we could go round and round on whether he asked or he was told, but that wouldn't be productive.
Did the President receive any phone call from any world leaders?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of.
So you felt all along that you would prevail in the end. Is this vindication today?
Oh, I think I'm going to avoid using words like that can mean many things to many people. I think the President expressed to you the responsibility he takes for the action, for his actions, and I think the lawyers did a very credible job of presenting the legal case, and it prevailed.
Would you not say it today? Does he still feel what he has said in the past, that he believes that he has been unfairly targeted by the independent counsel and others?
I'm not aware of any change in his thoughts on that.
Joe, what are his plans for the rest of today?
He will, at about 3:15, go into the trip meeting to look forward to the trip to Mexico, which will start on Sunday and be Monday. He'll get a briefing from his national security team about what to expect. That'll take probably about an hour. And then he's just got some phone and office time for the rest of the day. I expect he'll use that till the end of the day.
Joe, overall, would you describe this overall, Joe, as a legitimate process with a legitimate end?
Let me say that when we started talking about this 5 or 6 weeks ago, we looked for a process that was fair, bipartisan, constitutional, and I think by and large the process has been that.
Is it just because the vote came out the way you wanted it to?
No, it's because we set forward a criteria, and I think that criteria was met.
Sorry,
let me.
with the vote count?
We're pleased that a majority of the Senate said that on either charge was the case made.
You're still dealing with a Congress that's sort of half of which in both houses has voted to impeach the president. The president wants to move forward. What's the first step in trying to move forward with the Congress that's split like that?
Well, I think the president tried to reach out a hand just a few moments ago to Democrats and Republicans, saying that this needs to be and must be a time of reconciliation and renewal. That's obviously, I believe, the right sentiment for today. Congress will go off for a recess and for time back in their home constituencies, and when they come back, we'll be ready to work with them.
Did he talk to his legal team and Mrs. Clinton about the acquittal?
He certainly talked to the First Lady. I don't know that he's spoken to his legal team.
Since the president has been frequently photographed while playing golf with many different people, I'm wondering if you could tell us, has he ever played golf with O.J. Simpson, and would he be willing to do so if invited?
I don't know.
Will he seek a meeting with the House Majority Leader?
Sorry? Oh, I think over the last couple of days, we've indicated that when Congress comes back, there'll be an appropriate time for the president to get together, both with the Democrats and then the leadership across party lines. We've got a very aggressive legislative agenda. The president, as you know, wants to reserve most of the surplus to save Social Security, Medicare. We have an aggressive education agenda, health care, raising the minimum wage. These are all issues that, because of the nature of our government, we're going to have to reach out and get Republican support for. And I expect that when they come back at the appropriate time, we'll all get together and start working on that.
Joe in the back.
No.
Joe, was it a sign of victory today that the president's legal team came out through the Northwest Gate to go to lunch? Because normally they do not do that.
Normally they don't do what? Go to lunch?
Leave out of the North. Come in our view to leave out of the Northwest Gate.
I'm going to let me make 2 points. One is I'm going to stay away from words that, again, can mean many things to many people. And if you think walking out through one gate over another is some sort of signal to someone, you're overthinking.
Joe, is the fact that
It's because they normally eat at their desk and that they've got a well-deserved break today.
Well, half the president's remarks were almost word for word what he said just before the House impeachment vote. And this was a very short statement. Didn't the president have more to say about something this momentous?
No, I think the president thought that what he had to say was appropriate for the moment, and he said what he felt was the right thing to say.
Joe, is it important at all that not even a bare majority in the Senate voted for either article? What do you make of that?
I make of that those who were trying to prosecute this case did not provide the necessary evidence to make their case, and those who were defending the case made a compelling case.
Joe, did the president have his regular morning meetings with the staff and with Sandy Berger? And also, has the president, or did he talk to the Thomases before he made the speech?
The who? Oh, not that I know of. And he met with John probably early in the afternoon, and I think he'll see Sandy in a little bit.
When you say,
Yeah, I don't think he had the normal.
exercise, did he exercise in the gym, or this was just in the residence and not the gym? Or?
I think the gym in the residence. What's it? The butler and the what? Not
Chelsea.
I don't know. That's what I. Thank you for helping from the back. And because you helped in the back, any questions from the back? Yes.
Does the fact that half the Senate voted to remove the president any source of vindication for the House managers?
I'll leave that for the House managers to either claim, seek vindication or interpret.
Back to the president's schedule. You didn't mention him having lunch. Did he have lunch someplace in here?
I forgot to ask.
You believe that he still may be in jeopardy from Starr as far as a possible indictment, either now or after he leaves the presidency?
I think the president's legal team would prefer that I don't get into those issues, and I plan not to.
Meet with or talk to his legal team while they were here?
Today? No, I don't think so. I'm sure he will find some time to talk to him. Pardon?
The legal.
Have they disbanded?
No, they're still at lunch. That was pretty good.
No, it's not very good.
Okay, I'm sorry, Helen. Serious question, serious answer. No, there's clearly some. Where's Jim? Jim, you're fired. No, I expect some of the lawyers will move back to either what they were doing previously or back to their private sector cushy assignments. But the bulk of the legal team will continue doing all of the other work that the White House Counsel's office is charged with.
On the legal team,
Well,
will
what
we
you
ever
got?
get an accounting on how much was spent in legal fees by both the president and the staff members?
You'll get a sense from the president through the Legal Defense Trust that reports on a biannual or annual basis. Tony Essay, who is the guardian of that trust, I'm sure will be glad to help you with that. As far as individual employees here, that is up to them to disclose.
Joe, a few days ago, I think yesterday, you mentioned the possibility of a formal press conference.
Yes.
Now that everything is over, do we count with a press conference in the month of March? I think that's what you implied.
I hope to be able to tell you about that sometime in the near future. I can tell you, without giving away too much of the week ahead, that we will have a session on Friday with President Chirac of France, who will be in for a working visit. That'll be the standard joint, sort of, several questions from each side.
February. Why wait till March?
Well,
Half the month there.
don't get too greedy, Sam. I'm working on it.
The president on several occasions said that he is sorry for the inappropriate relationship and sorry for deceiving the nation. But has he expressed regret, or is his statement today an expression of regret for the conduct that was the focus of the House inquiry? In other words, it may not have been illegal, but the president's own legal team said it came close to the line. Does he feel that, as he looks back at his conduct, that it was a mistake for him to do some of these things that
that's
clearly ambiguous?
That's certainly the way I read it.
Joe, regarding Senator Feinstein's calling the president a reckless, shameless, deceitful, misleading, demeaning trust violator, doesn't her reluctance to vote to replace him with the vice president inevitably suggest that Mr. Gore is worse?
No. Claire, no, does not. No. Yeah.
An interview on NBC this morning, Linda Tripp suggested that there were threats on her life that came in directly from the president.
Right.
Do you have any?
I think any suggestion from Linda Tripp or anyone that the president has made threats is absolutely ludicrous.
Or the constant criminal activity at the White House she said she witnessed?
I'll leave Ms. Tripp to explain Ms. Tripp. I certainly, that'd be a task would be well beyond my abilities.
So she also said that the president held a meeting in July 1977 that was about her. Any idea if that's so?
I don't know anything about that.
Do you think that the outcome today will have any impact on the politics of personal attack, that whole way in which politics is conducted?
I certainly hope that if that's the one positive that we can take from this, that it could be that. We believe, as the president has talked about for 6 or 7 years on the national stage, that we've fallen into a cycle of the politics of personal destruction. We need to find a way out of it. And I think if both sides can look back at the events of the last year and take from that that the cycle needs to end and it needs to break, and by reaching across party lines, we can do that now. That would be a positive.
Joe, Henry Hyde said today that he did not believe that Ken Starr should indict the president. Is it time to put all of this away, never to be revisited?
Well, I think on that subject, the time has come, it's an issue that the independent counsel will have to search his own sense of whether the time has come to wrap this up.
Joe, can I go back to my question a minute ago? 'Cause I remember I asked you about this in December. It was at the time when Chuck Ruff said that reasonable people might think that he crossed over the line. And you said the president doesn't regret the fact that he came close to the line in the Paula Jones case, for example, because he felt it was an illegitimate lawsuit.
Right.
I mean, I'm trying to get a sense of whether, we all know the president's sorry for the inappropriate relationship and for deceiving, but the conduct that was the subject of this debate, I mean, does he feel that he made errors in judgment, even if not violations of law, in what he did?
No. Well, I can't decipher down to that level of detail, and no, I think he has spoken in a way that he believes is appropriate to this, and I'm going to leave it there.
Since this drama may be over now.
You're not going to celebrate?
Since this drama may be over now, you think President, it will make any difference for the President to do his job for the American people he was elected for?
Well, I think the President's been doing his job, and that in large part is why the President continues to enjoy solid support from the American public, and he'll continue to do that.
Why wouldn't the President celebrate? And by celebrate, I'm not suggesting gloat or any of that, but having been acquitted on these very two serious charges, why wouldn't he celebrate?
I think given the circumstances of this matter that's gone on for this long, we can be relieved it's over, but there's really nothing to celebrate.
Joe, I think that a lot of people were very impressed with your wonderfully ironic statement. I can't think of a worse or more dumb strategy than going after people based on whether they're a house manager or not. Could you give us your comment on...
With more proper syntax this time?
No, I just want to get your comment on Democratic...
That's my answer, not the question.
Bob Mulholland. Do you know what he said?
I don't.
Well, he said...
I'm going to find out.
This is on House Manager James Rogan. He said he's going to need an oxygen tent to live. He's dead meat. He doesn't need Dr. Kevorkian to help him. He's dead. The money we're going to bury him with, forget about Rogan. He's gone, gone, gone. What's your comment on that? Minister of Peace?
Myself, I do not share the sentiments of Mr. Mulholland.
Joe, if I could follow on to John's question
Sure.
before. The President has previously said he misled the American people, but he did not lie. Is that still his position?
As far as I know.
Joe, you've already indicated you want to meet with the GOP leadership to discuss Social Security. Can you just give us a better idea of the time frame? Is that going to happen very quickly after the recess?
I expect that both the President and the leadership of the House on both sides of the aisle will be anxious once they come back to town to get together. I can't give you a time because I don't know the time, but I think in a very quick fashion, the leadership will get together and we'll get moving on the agenda that the President's laid out.
Is there a certain agenda item that offers the most opportunity to kick off some bipartisanship?
Well, I think both parties agree that we have to get to Social Security, and I think much of I think the way the President has laid out his agenda, it's important that we get to Social Security and get some of these issues resolved because, the President believes that as far as what we do with the surplus, we have to look at Social Security, saving Social Security and Medicare first, and then we can look at the issues of the USA accounts and some of the other domestic and military priorities that the President's laid out. So I think while other issues we will continue to move forward on both education, healthcare, and others, I think you'll see discussions hopefully across party lines on the issue of what we do with the surplus and paying down the national debt.
Is there any way to find out how the President was able to sustain himself through this 1 year where he was called everything in the book by friend and foe? What is it that kept him going? What do you think it was?
I think it's a couple things, and I've talked to him about this. One is, while accepting the responsibility for what he did, he believes and has said that the way to make it right is to rededicate himself to doing his job and doing the best he can. I think, secondly, the President believes that when all said and done, when all of the partisan rancor has died down, the American public has a very good sense of fairness and what's going on. And I think he took some heart in that and focused on doing his job. I don't think it's any more complicated than that.
Joe, this morning from the Linda Tripp interview, she said she was fearful of many things. And now with these acquittals, do you feel that she should be fearful of her job now?
No.
Well, have you heard him say at all whether he thinks this whole thing has damaged the presidency?
I think, without assigning to any particular place, that there has been damage here to our institutions, and I think the President spoke to working hard and rededicating ourselves to repair any damage that's been done.
Will the
President now rededicate himself or emphasize more at some of the danger spots in the world, China, North Korea, other areas that are...
I think the president has a constant focus on those issues, as is his charge as commander-in-chief, and has never lost focus.
He said yesterday that the president would work for all Democratic candidates, not to target particularly anyone, meaning the Republican managers. Now that the process is over, will the president spend more time raising money or visiting?
No, the political schedule and the fundraising schedule, because of the nature of it, gets set well in advance. As I think I said yesterday, I'm not sure if it came up. He's got about a day a month over the next 5 months that's devoted to party building and fundraising. And that will remain the same. And at sometime in the next couple months, we'll look at the second half of this year and see what's appropriate.
If the First Lady decides that she doesn't want to move to New York and run for the Senate, is the President supportive of that?
If she decides that she doesn't...
Let's listen just to this answer before we...
Senate, if she decides that she does.
From his point of view, should she go for it if she wants to?
Well, I think up until the point that I know what the decision is, I'll leave it be, and then I'll say that he supports either way.
Anything new in Kosovo?
Nothing new to report.
An extraordinary day ending there with a question about the First Lady running for Senate in the state of New York in Bobby Kennedy buy a house, establish a residence fashion. Lockhart, of course, has never tried to knock down that story. No one on the record or off has. Dwight Eisenhower used to call his, at times, daily press briefings his daily cross that he had to mount. Dwight Eisenhower was never a press secretary. It can be tougher than being president. This was a verbal dance of death, the kind of thing that happens on a daily basis in that room. Not high drama or high theater, but certainly both, drama and theater, as Mr. Lockhart tried to deflect and tried to answer at the same time. Well, we are joined by a man who's been very patient with us as we've been watching this briefing, Christopher Hichens, Vanity Fair journalist who I want to become the first journalist to actually get to the article he's written for the latest edition of Vanity Fair before we let him go today. Christopher Hichens is now inextricably linked to this story, and his evidence, his affidavit, was admitted into evidence in the Senate. Christopher, before we explain the background, what do you expect will be your next contact with perhaps investigators? How are you expecting to go forward in this case?
I would expect there not to be any. This was some evidence that I gave when asked in the trial of the President. The President has been, to my slight astonishment and dismay, acquitted, but not surprised. It's not evidence against anyone else. It was evidence about the President also. It's useless to anyone else, and I've told the House Counsel that I don't intend to have myself be used to prosecute anyone else. In other words, if they try for some vindictive reason to go after the small fry, they have to do it without me.
But it may not. Well, is it up to you now that the cat's out of the bag and the affidavit, the print is on the affidavit?
Well, it's not up to me, of course. I mean, in the sense that, I mean, they have to shift the jurisdiction, they have to change the charge, and so on, all this kind of thing. But I've said that they'll be held in contempt before I'll be used to testify against anyone but Clinton, who I thought was in danger of being open to the charge of obstructing justice from what he did.
Via
the small way that I know about it, yes.
Via Mr. Blumenthal.
Mr. Blumenthal, as far as I know, is not the reason why any of those stories appeared in the press. But the reason why there may be some reason to deny it is that they don't want it thought that the President, the author of that story, wanted it in print, because if he did, it could be a threat against the witness, who'd already been given some inducements, if you follow me. In other words, it would constitute an obstruction. It could have been a warning to her to stay perjured. That's its significance. Since I'd already said that in print once, and told a number of people that it was true, I was not willing to call myself a liar when the House prosecutors asked me if I stuck to the story.
You wrote for the Independent, right?
Yes, last September, yeah.
What have the past couple of days been like for you?
Grim. People say, some disgusting things have been said about me. There are a couple of things I can't say yet. I'm not really allowed to say that I wish I had been able to. But I mean, after all, it's not me you should be feeling sorry for. It's the poor old U.S. Constitution.
Can you give us...
And its guardians in the Senate.
Can you give us categories, topics that you can't speak about yet?
No, I can't even do that. I don't mean to be mysterious, honestly.
Okay.
But what is rough is when you read really awful things by yourself in the print. Drunk, well, I take a drink. Anti-Semitic, conspiratorial, you know, all this kind of thing. And you're not allowed in some ways to defend yourself.
Yeah.
Except by repeating yourself, which is never terribly interesting.
Briefly, your article for this coming Vanity Fair, hitting newsstands on or about Monday or this weekend, has to do with curious timing. I read an advance copy. Curious timing of a grossly ineffective U.S. cruise missile strike. Curious timing of a very well televised mini war, the shortest Middle East war on record over Baghdad. Cull it together for us, if you will, in a few sentences.
Well, if what I say is true, and it survived the attention of an enormous number of lawyers and fact checkers and other people, the following is hard to argue against. It would be hard to argue against the proposition that President Clinton 3 times used his office as commander-in-chief and American cruise missiles in order to suit and to shape his court calendar and the public perception of it. The clearest case is that of Sudan last August, where he, without telling most of the Joint Chiefs, without consulting the CIA or the FBI, gave a presidential order, and without making a warning to Sudan they had to do something about a factory that he didn't like the look of, or said he didn't. He rocketed and destroyed the only pharmaceutical facility in an underdeveloped country in the hope of getting a bounce in the opinion polls. Now, the owner of that factory is now suing, and by the way, his case has been taken by Vernon Jordan's law firm. And that's the least of it. I mean, that'll be funny. I'm looking forward to the discovery stage of that. The fact the United States government has withdrawn in humiliation and shame every allegation it made against this man and his plant. And he's going to win. And then we're going to have it'll be too late then, because abuse of power was dropped as an impeachment count. But we'll have to ponder the implications of a president who would do such a thing. The article is called Weapons of Mass Distraction. And I guess it's available at fine bookstores everywhere.
I want to get your reaction.
You get a really good idea of what sort of person is the president from reading it.
I want to get your reaction to a piece of sound before we let you go. Aired on the Today Show this morning to much and legitimate ballyhoo, Linda Tripp, the recording artist in this story. Let's listen to one of the snippets from this morning on Today.
I'm a political appointee. I was completely afraid of my livelihood being in jeopardy. I have 19 years with the government. I was watching that potentially just go up in smoke. And beyond that, let's face it, there were threats. And did I take them seriously? Absolutely.
What kind of threats?
Threats to my life, threats to the lives of my children.
Who made those threats?
Monica made those threats and passed them along to me. I believed from the president. I believed I was in jeopardy.
You believed the president was threatening your life?
I believe that that was the message I was supposed to receive. Be a team player or else.
A weighty charge, to be sure, and we, by way of fairness, are duty-bound to show you the response today, minutes ago, from the White House in the person of Press Secretary Joe Lockhart.
I think any suggestion from Linda Tripp or anyone that the president has made threats is absolutely ludicrous.
There you have it. Christopher Hichens' reaction.
Well, of course, the president isn't going to make any such threats, except indirectly, as I believe he may well have done through the media, to Monica Lewinsky, who, if she had not had that dress, was going to be called a stalker and a blackmailer and a threatener, and would have been psychically and emotionally destroyed, I believe, if that had been said about her by someone who she had once loved, who is the most powerful man in the world. Ponder those implications. But of course, Mr. Clinton never gets asked any of these things himself. He has other people to face the questions for him and to take the fall. Now, you probably know, Brian, about a story that's going around Washington at the moment about threats made to Catherine Willey.
Yes.
Okay, now...
The jogging incident and
yes,
more.
and let's say, I don't want to sound as if I come from some, heaving conspiracy hog wallow in Falwellville or anything, but every informed journalist in Washington knows the following, that a private detective has admitted the claim, let's say, it's also, in my view, a confession, to having been hired to give Ms. Willey a hard time by someone who is not very many degrees of separation away from the president. So, we'll see if that story comes out or not, but no one is saying this is a filthy rumor or a politically motivated smear yet, are they?
No, they're not, and we'll assume it's less than 6 degrees. Are you comfortable naming names at all?
Well, Mr. Nathan Landau, who's a very well-known friend of the president and major Democratic fundraiser and fixer and so on, has been asked, did he hire this guy? And he said, I think I read somewhere about a Fifth Amendment. He said, I think he's sought the protection of that when questions are asked. So that's why I say it's considered many people to be an open question.
Christopher Hichens from Vanity Fair has been kind enough to be with us for what you couldn't see over an hour, what you could see the past several minutes, and again, Weapons of Mass Destruction is his latest piece in Vanity Fair.
Distraction.
Yes, okay.
Allow me the pun.
I'm sorry.
Very nice of you to plug it. Very boring of me to correct you.
No,
Very
that's
ungenerous of me. Thank you.
Okay, that's okay. Christopher, thank you very much for coming on. As you've heard, veterans of our coverage have become very familiar with the Senate roll call, and because anywhere there are two names, the state is then listed. So we have become used to, as viewers, hearing Mr. Reid of Nevada, Mr. Reid of Rhode Island. The latter is standing by live to talk to us, probably the last senator in the building who hasn't left for home this holiday weekend, but he'll be going back to Rhode Island, one would guess, in the next hour or so. Senator Jack Reid, thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Brian.
You are on the president's side in this, and you perhaps heard his 1 minute, 22-second long remarks. You perhaps at least know the gist of them. Do you think it's enough?
I believe the president sounded the right themes. He indicated that he was sorry, as he should be, that his behavior caused these events, that triggered these events, that he has remorse, but more than that, he is rededicating himself to doing his job on behalf of the American people, and that's the same spirit we should all embrace at the moment.
By my count, the remorse portion was the first, let's see here. Now that the Senate has fulfilled its constitutional responsibility, bringing this process to a conclusion, I want to say again to the American people how profoundly sorry I am for what I said and did to trigger these events and the great burden they have imposed on the Congress and on the American people. I'm also humbled for the grateful support that I've received over the past year. Now I ask all Americans. He transitioned rather quickly in this very brief statement. Do you think it was enough contrition? As it was pointed out by several people on the air so far, it's sentence fragments that we've already heard before.
Well, I believe, Brian, that the president will vindicate himself with the American people, not just by words, but more importantly by deeds. That if he is truly remorseful, that he will redouble his energy and his efforts to ensure that Americans have opportunity to work, have good health care, have all the things that he asked the American people to elect them to accomplish for them. So it's not so much the words, I think it's the deeds, and he started the right tone with this brief message today.
Do you agree, were you stunned by Henry Hyde's warning that the president should not be indicted in any criminal matter, either while still in or after leaving office?
I was not aware of that, given the duties I'm here and meetings I've had, but I think that makes a great deal of sense, and that is a very thoughtful comment by Chairman Hyde.
I know you're not near the floor, which we can look at quickly. Perhaps Senator John Warner is speaking. What is going on? Are they still, a few members still in looking to get a censure resolution? Of course.
No, the censure resolution has been stymied by Senator Graham of Texas' parliamentary motions today. I believe that the Senate essentially is wrapping up business on some routine matters, and we'll reconvene in about a week. And I suspect that you'll see a flurry of legislative activity as we try to get back to the business of the people.
What would you, what's the toughest language you would use to this president about, to be candid about it, what he's put the process and the people through, what he apologized for today?
Well, I've co-sponsored Senator Feinstein's resolution of censure, and that's pretty tough language. It talks about either false or misleading statements. It also talks about actions that may have had the effect of impeding the process of justice. Those are tough words. They don't constitute criminality, but they're tough words.
Senator Jack Reid of the state of Rhode Island, enjoy your weekend, and thanks for coming on the air with us tonight. At this point, let's pause and show you some of what we were just talking about. The remarks today received a lot of attention prior to his departure, by the way, for the state of Illinois, his home state, by Henry Hyde, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, who was, let's remember, prior to this case, known chiefly for, he was called a zealot alternately about his stand on abortion, the Hyde Amendment. which bore his name, was his primary legislative achievement. Increasingly, with the rightward shift of many in Congress, Hyde has been called one of the level-headed moderates among the Republican Party. He chairs a Judiciary Committee known as containing a lot of partisan zealots, both left and right. Henry Hyde, though, today seemed to be saying enough is enough.
I have no regrets. We fulfilled our oath of office to discharge our duty according to the Constitution. And when people do that, when elected representatives do that, democracy works.
Hyde went on to say he does not believe, again, this president should be indicted in a criminal matter either while in office or after leaving office. Which brings us to the law, which invariably brings us to our friend Jonathan Turley of George Washington University Law School. Professor, what of the talk that Janet Reno could remove Ken Starr? What of the talk that Ken Starr, of course, remains fully able to indict this president legally? Removal of the independent counsel in this case, wouldn't it conjure up a certain Saturday night in the 70s?
Well, it would certainly do that. I think Janet Reno is sensitive to her place in history. There are unresolved issues here. There are cases being prosecuted by the independent counsel. There's a very serious investigation involving Sidney Blumenthal with evidence that he may have committed perjury in his testimony to the Senate through his deposition. Those matters will continue to be investigated. For Janet Reno to replace this independent counsel would be viewed as somewhat heavy-handed, given the merits of those cases. The other thing is that there is a strong case against this president that can be made, and there's a curious habit in this scandal that before it's sort of a bait and switch, that throughout this trial various Democrats have said, we believe that he should be accountable to the criminal law as a citizen. But once we finish with impeachment, you have a chorus started, curiously, with Henry Hyde, saying we shouldn't go through this on an indictment. On this issue, there's a rather clear line. Whatever happens to the president as a citizen is no longer a political matter and no longer a concern solely for people like Henry Hyde, who I happen to respect. But whether that president is charged with perjury and obstruction has nothing to do with the view of the Congress of the United States, and has a lot to do with the laws of this nation.
Jonathan Turley, point well put and well taken. Let's take a break here. When we come back, among our other guests, Jonathan Alter, Newsweek magazine, Lanny Davis, formerly of this Clinton White House, some would say arguably still on the team. This is NBC News special coverage. The nation now hears from Linda Tripp, the woman whose taped telephone calls broke a story wide open and accelerated the drive toward impeachment.
On the news tonight on MSNBC.
We know you have a choice in electronics. We hope that while you keep it here, you also join us on the interactive side, the other side of this venture, one of the arms of NBC News, the website at msnbc.com, chiefly to find out, depending on the state where you live, how your senator voted on both counts today. In case busy lives being what they are, you were not around for our live coverage of the back-to-back votes. A thoroughly dramatic moment that surprised Americans, great and small, average citizens and historians like Doris Goodwin, who told us a few hours ago here on the air that she was physically chilled by it. So were the bulletin writers at the Associated Press. Quote, Chief Justice William Rehnquist pronounced the president to be acquitted of the impeachment charges. It was upon reading that and hearing it on the airwaves that a lot of Americans were hit with the gravity of today, had it not sunk in earlier. Also this day at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, saw the airing of the remarks by Linda Tripp, known chiefly for her role, of course, in the recorded phone conversations with the president's chief witness, Monica Lewinsky. We want to play some of that for you now. Linda Tripp defending her actions in this case with Jamie Gangel.
I know what they think. I've seen it. I would think almost the same thing, I think, if I hadn't been there. But I was there. And I saw the year of hysteria, histrionics, suicide threats. This was not a relationship. This was not an affair.
She was going to commit suicide?
She threatened suicide on more than one occasion, yes. This was and no one will believe this, Jamie, in part to protect Monica. Where would Monica be today without that dress? Tell me. Would she be the stalker? Would she be the person who demanded sex of the president? Where would Monica be?
Linda Tripp on Today, and it's not too early in the game for a program note as we're coming up on 3:45 p.m. 9 o'clock tonight when we join you for our normal primetime news hour on MSNBC, and then an hour later in all time zones on CNBC. We will have the entire Tripp interview as it aired. We'll also be joined by the correspondent, veteran NBC News correspondent, and Today's Show national correspondent, Jamie Gangel will be with us tonight to talk about a lot of what she could not say or relate on camera. The atmospherics, perhaps, is a good term for it, behind the scenes of the Linda Tripp interview. And speaking of behind the scenes, Lanny Davis, former White House special counsel, still with us. Lanny, have you been able to make a phone call or two in the intervening minutes, or are you putting that great pleasure off for later?
I thank you for saying that I still may be on the team, but the pay isn't very good, so I just wanted to close that up about, I'm a volunteer, as you know.
Yes.
The mood is relief. There is no celebration, and there is no joy. I feel some vindication that for a long time, when I said some months ago, if we turn the lights on the case, the evidence is extremely weak on perjury and non-existent on obstruction, I feel that the House has been repudiated by not even getting a majority of the Senate to support their viewpoint. But I can tell you that I'm off message by even saying that much, because people at the White House are reaching out and want to reach out to both the House Republicans and the House and the Senate Republicans to try to start to govern again. And the president's tone and spirit was genuine in wanting to do that.
Jonathan Turley, reaction to your sometimes friend, sometimes nemesis, Counselor Davis, formerly of the White House staff.
He's a friendly nemesis.
Yes.
The reaction is that this is going to represent the same divide, and it's going to linger. We can't expect the president's call for renewal to simply wipe away the problems. He's our legitimate president. He survived an impeachment process. He has that sense of consent to go forward. But we can't delude ourselves. You know, people refer to impeachment as partisan. It's not partisan. It's personal. There's a big difference. That's why feelings are so strong, and that's why they will continue to linger. There's nothing more personal than your expectations of your leaders. And those of us who believe the president disgraced his office, frankly, it's going to be hard for us as we go on and see him carrying out those duties. We owe him and the country our loyalty, but that doesn't mean that those feelings simply dissipate. They won't.
Lanny?
I agree with Jonathan. The feelings are personal, and the kinds of words used about the President of the United States, even by my colleague Jonathan, words like perjurer and criminal and crime, all of them unproved. And now, as we see, not even a majority of a Republican Senate has agreed with Professor Turley's judgment.
But a majority of the public does.
Well, a majority of the public overwhelmingly wanted to keep him in office, as you know, and we also know that most people think the lie before the grand jury was about the relationship, when that's what he was truthful about. But Jonathan, I think you and I have come full circle, and we probably agree that the Constitution worked. The Senate made us proud. We had people disagreeing agreeably, just as you and I do, and in contrast to the House, where I do think it was illegitimately partisan. I think either way, the process in the Senate was fair, and we've come to the right conclusion.
Lanny, 2 points, both devil's advocate on my part, as you no doubt know by now. Number one, Jonathan Turley correctly points out that millions of Americans trust this president, and it's sad, bordering on pathetic, about as far as they can throw his 6'3" frame. Number two, who do American parents of young children, as has so often been pointed out, as the damaged party in this, who do they go to see about the fact that they have been forced in the privacy of their own homes, cars, into explaining sexual matters to children too young to comprehend? They have been forced into doing it. This is irrefutable. I can tell you, by the President of the United States.
It is irrefutable. It is sad. The President has to do a lot of work to repair all of those strains that he's caused. And I think the way he can accomplish that today, being a good beginning, is to go back to do the work that has led him to be, even with all that you just said that I agree with, the most popular job approval second-term president in U.S. history at 70% approval ratings, notwithstanding the validity of everything you said. So that's what he's got to do to restore the personal trust, is to go back to being an effective president.
You know, Brian, on that, actually, Lanny and I can agree. I'm perplexed in some ways by the public reaction. It's not that the constitutional standards have changed. I think we have changed. If this case had occurred at the beginning of the century instead of the end, it would have come out differently. And that's something a lot of us have got to sort of think about. Maybe I'm just not ready for the 21st century. Maybe I should just pretend I'm still in the go back to the 18th century. But at the end of the day, there is this vast gulf between the expectations that people have. This president has long defined morality by its consequences. And I don't agree with Lanny. I don't think he'll view this as a consequence. I think that in some ways we enabled this president. But that'll be a debate between citizens. Frankly, the government will go on.
That'll be viewed as nothing short of brilliant, a president who has defined morality by its consequence, and few are lining up, I note, to argue the point. I want to bring in someone who we retain on an of-counsel basis here in the studio when political matters arise, as they often do in these